Hello, my name is Jason Porter, Director of Programs at TGR Foundation. Thanks for joining today as we look at active learning through the mind jar. We're really going to be exploring how to set up an active learning environment, especially in a remote learning classroom. So come with me and let's figure it out together. One of the first things I want to pose to you is, what do you feel the greatest needs for youth at this current time? Given the current teaching situations and learning situations and just what everyone is having to deal with during the pandemic, what do you think youth need and could use from interactions at school? A lot of things that I'm hearing from educators really fall into kind of three major categories. The first being just interaction, right? Having the opportunity to talk to peers and to talk to teachers, just talk to different people. That's something that used to happen all the time when they would come into a school building and just throughout their daily lives, and it's much more limited and can be really isolating right now. Another piece is emotional support. Right? Students actually get a lot of emotional support at school and with their peers and at recess and on the playground and in lunch and lots of different interactions with their peers and their teachers. And those needs are still there. Can be a little more challenging though when we're in a remote environment. And other needs that students really have, it's just kind of good old-fashioned learning, right? You get into a classroom and teacher starts the lesson in an interesting way, gets you thinking, gets you doing some active things. You're working with your peers and learning things through exploring. Like, that's just really fun. And a lot of students really covet and like those opportunities. And it might be a little more challenging during remote times right now. So we're going to explore today, how can we meet some of those needs through setting up some active learning environments, even when it's remote. So I'm going to introduce to you the mind jar and how we can use that in really giving an example of these active learning classrooms. Now, the mind jar really is an example. So you can use lots of other demonstrations and building projects and scientific explorations with your students in the same way. But this is really just an example of how you can establish these active learning environments. And so let me introduce my friend, the mind jar, so you can see it right there. And we're going to build this together, so you'll see how this goes together. And you'll see how this really is interesting because it's a scientific exploration activity. It is an active learning where we're actually going to build some things together. And this can also be used for some social emotional support. So really kind of putting together all those needs that our students have right now that we've identified. So let's go ahead and check this out. First thing we're going to want to do is figure out what kind of supplies that we're going to need for building the mind jar. And so this is the kind of thing where you would want to let your students know ahead of time, bring these supplies or have access to some things. That can actually be really interesting to find out from students what they have at home and how they might want to use those supplies in a certain challenge. Or to build a certain thing. Students might be using different materials, but might come to some really interesting and unique ideas. So that can be a real opportunity right there. But for us, so we are going to give students a list of supplies, and you can see those there on your screen. So let me share with you some of the supplies that you're going to need today. First, and you can actually gather these supplies if you want. So if you want to hit pause, gather these supplies, and then build the mind jar together with me, that'd be excellent. So please feel free to do that. So first off, we're going to need like corn syrup. So you can see that right there. Definitely an important component. We are going to need a jar. Okay, so just some kind of a canning jar. This would need glass or plastic. So again, really just any kind of a jar that has a lid. So the lid is a really important part of that. We are also going to need some soap. And so you can see I just have some pump soap right there, so it just makes it a little bit easier to use. The other things that we are going to need is some glitter. And so you said I have some coarse and I have some fine glitter. You can really just kind of any glitter that you can get will be fine. And the colors can be whatever it wants. And again, this could be a really great way for students to express themselves. And the final thing that you're going to need is some water. So I just have a pitcher of water there, and so you'll need to be able to add some water. Okay, so let's go through the process now of actually putting the mind jar together. And this is something that I would do together with my students. So have them gather their materials so that they have them ready and in front of them, and then we would go through those steps. And one of the things that you're going to notice as we go through those steps is asking lots of questions, asking students to make lots of observations. That makes this learning a lot more active and makes them a lot more interested in the thing that we're doing. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our jar. So just going to put it in the middle there. And I'm going to add some corn syrup. Typically, I tell students you want to fill it up about 1/3 of the way. And so, you can kind of point out with your finger where 1/3 of the way shows up, but just kind of give them that direction and help them kind of figure out where that is. So just putting in some corn syrup, and we're going to go about 1/3 of the way. I went maybe a little bit too high, but that's not a big deal. And that's actually something interesting to talk about with the students is why did I say 1/3 and what should that actually be? What if we go too much? How do we fix that? So that could be an interesting conversation to have with your students. And this is interesting here in that you want to have them look at that Karo syrup, because if they kind of turn their jar over a little bit, have them see it kind of coats the side. It's a fairly viscous material and liquid, so have them explore that and make some observations. And what do you notice about that Karo syrup? The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some water. Okay. And you're going to add water up to about the neck of the jar in this bell jar. Again, exactly where the water is not the most important thing, but you want about 1 part Karo syrup to about 2 parts of water. So we're going to go ahead and add that. Okay. And here, when you have your students adding the water, it's really good to ask them, so what do you notice about the water? If I tilt this a little bit, you should be able to see it. What do you notice about the viscosity or how liquid the water is versus the Karo syrup? They'll probably notice that there are layers. There's a Karo syrup layer there in the bottom, and there's a water layer. So you can talk about that. This is excellent for density, right? So if you want to talk to your students about density and how different density of materials combine, this is an excellent lesson for talking about that. All right, and so the next part now is we are going to add in some glitter. And so first I'm just going to shake in some of that coarse glitter. You'll notice that glitter sits on the top of the water, which is interesting. So you can ask students, what do they notice? Why does it sit on the top like that? Really good opportunity to talk about surface tension and properties of water. And so why would it just sit there? And then I'm going to add a little bit of this fine glitter. Same thing, that's also sitting on the top. Okay. And I am going to shake these 2 layers together, but before I do that, I'm actually going to add just a little bit of soap, like maybe a drop or 2. And you'll have to kind of see how much you want to add. It might just be 1 drop. It might be a couple drops. It kind of depends on how your soap dispenses this. And another good thing to talk with your students, how much should they use and how do they know? And what if you use too much or use too little? And so have that conversation about what they're observing and noticing in their mind jar. Okay, so I'm going to start out with just kind of adding a pretty healthy squirt. Okay. And here's one of the interesting things that you start to notice is that the glitter, if you can see it here on the camera, actually I'm going to hold it up like this. The glitter is actually starting to sink. So you can see that glitter falling there after I added the soap, and now it's sitting on that second layer of Karo syrup. Some of it either is floating up and down. So really interesting that you're kind of changing those properties there. With the soap, you're really breaking that surface tension. So having students, again, explore, I'm going to add another little drop of soap here to see that again. So again, breaking that surface tension and seeing how that glitter just really starts falling from one layer to the other. Now it's really sitting on that layer of Karo syrup. So lots of interesting conversations in science that they can explore just from putting together this jar. Okay, now we are going to spin on the top. Okay, you want to make sure it's fairly tight. There is an opportunity here if you wanted students to use super glue so they can actually glue their lids shut the whole time. So it makes it a permanent mind jar. You don't have to have them do that. It's completely up to you and to them. If they are using super glue, just let them know that they have to be careful with that they can end up gluing their fingers together. So just give them some of the safety concerns about super glue. If you end up using it, you don't really have to. It'll stay permanent enough if you just if you don't glue the jar together. All right, so now that I have the lid here pretty good, I'm going to shake my mind jar. Okay. Okay. And you'll notice some Karo syrup might be sticking to the bottom. So you just want to shake that really good so you get it all combined as best that you can. Okay. And you're just going to let that sit for a little bit. And what you'll see, shake it again. I may have added a teeny bit too much curd syrup, but you just shake it around quite a bit. If you add more soap, you'll see that you'll get a little more foaming. But again, something interesting to talk to students about and ask them why they think that's happening. Okay. But then after you've shaken up your mind jar, you can take a look and see all that glitter floating around. Now it's a single phase. You don't have those two layers anymore. You've got that nice single phase. And you have that glitter kind of dancing around in that jar. And as you shake it, more and more that happens. Now, one really interesting thing to talk to your students about is how fast that glitter falls. See, my glitter is actually falling pretty fast. And so that's an interesting challenge is, what if you tell them, okay, I want the glitter to fall, a piece of glitter falls every 30 seconds. Okay, so that actually would be quite a bit slower rate for that bigger glitter. For me than what I have here. Mine's falling much faster than that. And give them that challenge of, so what do you have to do to change this? Do you add more corn syrup or do you add more water? What do you think you would do to change the density of that total liquid so that the glitter changes its falling rate? So that'd be a great challenge to add into this. Actually a great way where students could do that later on, bring that back to another class and show you what they did. So a nice class where you're building things together, learning how it's all working, they're doing their observations, then come back the next day, try and meet that challenge, and then they can share what they did to try to meet that challenge. That would be a very active learning environment and something you could definitely do remotely with just a few little simple technologies. One thing I will mention that I haven't mentioned yet is that you notice that I have been showing in this secondary camera. We're actually going to put a link at the bottom of this video to how you can set up a secondary camera if you don't know how to do that for Zoom or for Google Meet. That is something that would be pretty important. You could try and make it work on the primary camera, and that can work, but if you have a secondary camera set up as well, kind of like a dock camera or something like that, or a webcam, make it a little bit easier to see some of the building like I showed you, and just easier for students to see some of the visual of it. Okay, but if you only have the one camera, you can make that work too. That'll be fine. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that we're doing in this demonstration, some of the things that you saw me try to model and how I would run this with students is number one, just asking lots of questions, asking students to observe what they see, and then trying to push their learning by using questioning strategies to go along with that. So you probably heard me a lot of times saying, do you notice this? What do you see? What do you think? What do you think about that? And why do you think that? Right? Why do you think that's happening? What's your kind of prior knowledge, or what are you observing that's helping you to understand that and to think in that way? And then can kind of push it even further is, so how do you know, right? How do you know that that's true, or what would you do to test it to make sure and convince yourself that that's actually true? One I really like to add too is under what conditions, right? So definitely if you're dealing with some older students or students that are, have some experience with science and questioning and inquiry, under what conditions do you think this would happen, and under what conditions do you think this wouldn't happen? So really would expand their thinking and their observing skills of science and STEM activities. And then of course, what questions do you still have? Okay, so what did this make you think of? Usually when you're really active and learning in a really active way, lots of new questions come up. And so that's a really important thing to ask your students is what questions do you have? And that might even lead to another lesson, right? The next thing you're going to do, for example, that rate activity with looking at how fast is that glitter falling in the mind jar, that could be a really good elaboration activity where it's like, what questions do you still have? Why do you notice it falling in that way? And how might you be able to change the mind jar to change how it's falling? Okay, so it's a good example of elaborating on the basic activity. So remember to be planning out those questions that you're going to be asking your students while you're setting up activities like this. So you really can push their observations and push their thinking to get them to think at fairly high levels while they're also doing a very active, fun activity. That's what makes it higher level thinking, is that they're taking those observations and really pushing them to another level. All right, so one other thing that you can also use is mind jar for. So we, talked about that kind of active learning, and so we hit on some of those things and students being able to see those very visual aspects of the learning. Another part of it is the interaction that we talked about, right? So again, asking the questions and having peers talk amongst each other, that's really going to force that interaction. Get those cameras to come on, right? Because that might be a challenge. We'll give them a reason to have those cameras on. And the last thing that we haven't really touched on yet is that kind of emotional side. So let's explore that now and how the mind jar might be helpful with some of this social emotional learning that students are really need right now, and that we can help them with. And so first of all, one way to look at this is thinking about a model, right? And so I like to talk with students when I do these activities with students about the mind jar really being a model of your kind of emotional state or how you're thinking, and that sometimes it's really calm, right? So sometimes it looks like that, where there's not much going on and just sitting very still. And that might be a time when you're, really focused or, feeling okay about what's happening. But other times it's like this, right? It's like a storm and you just feel uneasy and you feel like you don't know, what you're supposed to be doing or how you're supposed to be doing it. You don't know how to calm down. You don't know how to focus. And people are telling you to do that, but you don't know how. And so it's just really tough, right? And we all get into this state where, we just don't know what to do emotionally and need some strategies to help to calm down. So first off, let me talk about a model of the brain that really helps kind of show why that happens. And this is something you can absolutely do with your students. Okay, so let's go ahead and hold our hands up and try this model of the brain. I can't hold you accountable that you're actually doing this, but if you want to do it along with me so it kind of makes some sense. And so you can kind of use this to show the different parts of the brain to your students. So you have this very limbic part of the brain, where the amygdala is, also known as the kind of animal brain, okay? And this is the part that's very instinctual, very about reacting quickly. Our understanding is that this is really an evolved part of the brain to help us survive in predator situations or life and death situations. And then we have the prefrontal cortex, or that thinking brain, okay? And so most of the time, those two areas are connected, okay? And so you have some ability to make quick decisions and be instinctual, but you're also calm and can think and make good decisions. And so this is kind of the brain functioning how you'd want it to function in kind of an everyday situation or in a school situation where you're able to take in information, interact with your peers, and make decisions, okay? But sometimes, like a model of our mind jar, when the mind kind of goes nuts, right? It's all over the place and we can't focus. It's because there's a disconnection, right? And so that limbic, that animal brain is really kind of taking over. And so it feels disconnected. And it's just kind of all over the place and you can't focus. So this is a nice little model to show students why they feel like that sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing, and it's not your fault that you feel that way. It's the way that the chemistry in your brain is working, and it's just how you're feeling at that time. But you can have strategies where you can help yourself calm down and get back into that more thinking mode instead of being kind of all over the place and having a hard time focusing. So this is another place where we can use our mind jars. And so what I tell students when I help them build these is, yeah, we're using this for STEM and for science and kind of understanding density and different properties. It's also a fun interactive activity we can do together. But keep this near you. And I always have these mind jars near me because you can use this as strategies for calming down, okay? So have it at your desk where you normally do your schooling. And anytime that you're feeling unfocused or you're feeling like you just can't stay calm, use this mind jar to help you calm. And the way that you can do that is I tell students to pick it up and to shake it around like a snow globe, okay? And then just kind of focus on the glitter that's falling through there. So you can look at individual pieces, either the large pieces or the small pieces, watch as they fall. If it starts to slow, you can shake it back up again, see all the pieces fall through, see as they're swirling around. While you're doing that, you've been doing some breathing, making some big breaths. That breathing alone is really going to calm you down. But looking at, like, say, a piece of glitter floating through a mind jar is going to get your brain to focus. And it's really it's gonna slow your breathing, it's gonna slow your pulse, it's gonna give you something to focus on. And more times than not, it's gonna allow you to calm a little bit. So you can kind of decide, okay, what's going on right now? What are the conditions I need to be in so that I can be okay? Or what conversations do I need to have? Get you out of that state where you don't even know you're frantic. You don't even know what to do. And calm you to the point where you can kind of figure out, okay, so what do I do now? And how do I feel a little bit better? So hopefully that was a useful activity and useful example of how we can use these active learning strategies to really combine exploring interesting scientific and STEM principles and lots of other kind of principles too. Putting it together with observation and questioning and really having students kind of open their minds to what they're seeing and why they're seeing that, as well as that interaction and emotional support, right? So really getting to know your students, really letting them see you as, hey, I'm here for you. Even if I'm on a screen, right? And I'm not right there next to you, I'm still here for you and I care about how you're feeling. And in fact, I'm gonna give you some ways that you can help yourself feel better when you don't feel well and when I'm not around. Okay, so all of that is really going to lead to you feeling better and students feeling better, and really learning how to use remote learning environments as a way to have these really rich learning experiences like the ones that teachers are setting up in their classrooms. So thanks again for joining today. I hope you learned something today and taking something away from this. I really had a good time demonstrating this with you. I wish we could spend some more time, but there is that opportunity. So we do host monthly workshops with educators. If you look at the link on the screen, that'll allow you to sign up to our educator community to get newsletters and e-blasts when those are actually happening. They happen every month from now until June 2021. And if you sign up on our newsletter, you're also going to learn about opportunities this summer to join us definitely virtually and potentially even in person for more professional development and learning together. So please join our community. We would love to have you. We would love to work with you some more. We really are trying to meet lots of different educators and promote active learning and learning through inquiry. And so we'd love you have to join this movement and continue learning with us. Please notice in your virtual backpacks that all teachers should be receiving from TGR Foundation that we have shared some design challenges that you can do with your students, and even they're appropriate for families to do together. So please check those out. We've also included a flyer for joining our monthly educator workshops. So please check those out. And if you have any questions, you can email us at the email on the flyer or join our educator community to get those regular e-blasts. Students are also going to be receiving flyers for signing up for our student online experiences, online classes. So please have them check out their virtual backpacks and take those opportunities if they're interested. So on behalf of the entire TGR Edu Create team, thanks for joining and hope to see you again soon.